the female and the two spirits, they were, sort of
revered,
right?
Yeah.
But now it's all like, because of the bad education or trying to brainwash or take the native out of the native. That's totally reversed now. Whereas the women are just being completely abused.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now there is a couple of reserves, and I'm not sure if it's in the Maritime area or if it's in Northern Ontario, but basically is the 6 chiefs that they've got are all females, and basically is that they said what we are addressing is the damage done by residents. And they said it never used to be part of Indian culture of domestic violence and sexual abuse, and especially sexual abuse to children.
Mm-hmm.
And they listed off all of these things, and they said that was all learnt in residential schools. And she said, our job as chiefs is, this is going to stop. And basically, and they were bringing in all of these things to stop, because they said, until we fix that, nothing will be solved.
I thought it was interesting too, like he talked about the behaviors were learned, but also that culturally expressing anger towards others wasn't the native way.
Yes.
And now that they have all of these sort of bottled up problems, you get to a breaking point and maybe you're drinking or something's going on, and then all of a sudden you just explode, and then it comes out in this very violent way because the people aren't prepared or know how to deal with those emotions, which I thought was interesting.
Well, and also is the fact that they didn't have anything as that if you've done wrong, you're now punished.
They didn't have a word for forgiveness because they didn't have a concept of blame.
Yes.
Yeah, and he said that exactly.
That was fascinating.
Which is kind of like one thing here. I mean, he says here he tried to utilize the amendments to the judicial code, right? And the last amendment was about paying particular attention to the circumstances of original offenders. So it's all, everything he had tried to do around the judgments and his verdicts he was trying to use that amendment, but he was sort of pushed back. I mean, the interpretation was stonewalled up, all over that. But that's precisely the reason why I'm sure they put in that, or that was the spirit of that amendment. But it seems like nobody wants to touch it or actually do anything about it.
Yeah. It's just for paper only, not for...
There is a judge in the Saskatoon area, and he's the one who basically we're going to have the healing circles.
Yeah.
And he's really brought in, that's how the healing circle? Yeah. But he's also, it was quite controversial when he said it, but he said that's what we're doing. Cause he said, we're not, he said all we're doing is just, he said prisons are overloaded. And he said nothing is being solved.
Well, you mentioned, you mentioned the prisons overloaded. Now this government is going to start building extra prisons. They're going to tighten the judicial, the laws and minimum sentences and all this. It's just going to get worse. I mean, we're going to just make things worse. We're going to start sending more and more
friend of mine
First Nations and to MAT to...
Oh, yeah.
I seen a perfect political caricature of it, though, and it was Stephen Harper talking to somebody, and the guy goes, "Oh, I'm so glad that you're increasing funding for the prison systems. Now, what are we going to do about the mentally ill and the homeless?" And then the next one is, "I already told you, we're increasing the prison."
Right.
And it's kind of the truth, because who's going to go to prison? The people who need mental health services.
That's the other, is it basically, is it when, and it was Ronald Reagan who did this, but they, Canada jumped on board, is, when they opened up the doors to the insane asylums. It used to be, and if you knew, is you could have somebody committed. You can't have people committed anymore. Yeah. And they also used to keep, if it basically is you would be committed if you were to do harm to yourself or others. And that would basically, and at least somebody was taking care of you. Now you're out in the street.
I would really, I hate to give Harper any credit. I really would like to see the prisons expanded, but them being like wards of mental health with proper services, addiction areas with proper services. Yeah, exactly. So if he's really going to do this, if he does it with a little bit of compassion,
so there is
and understanding, exactly, then that would happen. Then I would be happy for it. But I know that's not Harper's belief he's more in the punishment,
Yes.
back to the British monarchy, the royal prison system.
Yeah. Well, the scary thing of it is it's somebody asked me, said, do you think he's going to try and bring back capital punishment?
Oh, I
He
would
wouldn't
did.
touch that, would he?
Well, you don't
Some of his
know.
backbenchers might.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I
his
agree.
backbench- And that's
Yeah.
the other, is that you don't, he's got his majority. And if he brings it in early, right? And that's the scary thing, is by the time the next election comes around, yeah,
You know what's sad? He has the opportunity to really take repeat sexual offenders and leave them in jail. And he's not increasing that. He's increasing the small little things like the marijuana. You know, I don't understand why he wants Canadians that would work and be his little happy little slaves out in the real world doing their minimum wage jobs.
But-
Why?
But this is the scary thing of it is it basically is people, oh, there's crime, oh, there's crime, oh, there's crime, you know.
Well, the
And
rates are going down.
I know they're going down, and then also, but this is the other, is that, yeah, you know, this kid that was shot and killed, and right, those are gangs.
Mm-hmm.
They're gangs going after other gangs. It's not they're like coming after,
Yeah.
you know, the innocent people.
Yeah. But this is probably, you
Yeah.
mentioned prohibition earlier, and this
Yeah.
is tied to the last book we
It
did.
is.
It was the Armageddon factor, which
Yes.
is all tied to the Christian right, which
Yes.
is what the conservatives are really,
Yeah.
Trying to.
Because the reality of it is, they legalized all drugs, taxed the hell out of them, and built detox. You're putting all the bad guys out of work, and that's why they reversed prohibition, put all the basically all the gangsters, you know, were now out of business.
I wonder if we're going to see something similar with the whole new laws towards cannabis.
Well, somebody pointed out in the States they need the taxation.
Yeah.
And it very well, right? They're losing their war on drugs, but if they start taxing, and especially taxing, putting the dope dealers out of business, and then finding out, you know, and getting the taxation,
Mm-hmm.
that might change. If they're going after Canadians, or basically Americans who've never set foot on American soil but have, you know, the dual citizenship,
Mhm.
now have to file taxes, they will legalize. Right, they will start legalizing, and it be it cannabis, but basically they will start slowly legalizing and taxing.
It makes you wonder what some poor soul who's been here 10 years or so is going to pay all those back taxes.
Well, there was one woman who has always had her dual income, her dual citizenship, never lived in the States.
Mhm.
And she now has to pay taxes. And she said, it's not like I can say, oh, well, I'm giving up my American citizenship, because she said, that's also going to cost me. And it's kind of like, really? But they're broke.
They're not broke. They're just not stealing from the right people.
No, they're not taxing but that's the other, is that it's when Bush put in the if you make over so much they're not taxed, and that's what Warren Buffett said.
Yep.
My secretary's paying more taxes than I am, and he's 100% right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
Yep. That's what all of those protests are
Yeah.
about. How come the rich
Yeah, are not paying their fair share.
Yeah. It's
But
ridiculous.
even like when I moved here, like I'm from Nova Scotia, and when I moved to Alberta, I was shocked at how little I'm taxed
Yes.
on my income tax, because I always, you know, growing up in Nova Scotia, the tax rate is very high, and I remember my parents saying things like, "Oh, like half our money goes to taxes," and you know, just the regular comments. So I was expecting half my money to go to
Especially
taxes.
since we don't have a sales tax, you're
But-
expecting it to, yeah.
10% flat taxes.
It's a very small amount that
Yeah.
actually goes, and I was shocked to see that. And then, you know, I'd actually rather pay provincial tax and see that it's going somewhere here.
Yeah, I don't mind paying taxes if the taxes are going to the right
To the right
programs.
place, yeah.
You know, if they're going to.
I had a American friend, and the reason they came up here, he was Canadian, she was American. He'd been laid off, and she was pregnant, and he came up to Canada because he said, "If second year laid off, you have no Medicare." He says, "We couldn't afford to have that baby." He said, "We would have had that baby in the streets." So he came up, he got a job, she couldn't work. She was absolutely horrified when she saw how much taxes were taken off his paycheck. But then she looked around, is that she could help, the kids could go play in the playground, and it was safe, where they came from Florida. And she says, oh, there's parks. But basically, that's where all the drug deals go. Nobody's safe going in those. Nobody would send their kids. She said, you know, those roadside turnouts that basically go in. She said, people go in there and they're never seen again. So she was horrified when she saw the taxes. She looked around and she said, oh, look at this, look at this. She knew, and that's when she was kind of like,
Well, it's like Sweden and Norway,
Yeah.
these places, right?
Yeah.
Where my friend's from Norway, and I mean, they pay a ridiculous amount of
Yes.
tax, sales tax and income tax,
Yes.
but everything
it's covered.
is amazing, and
Yeah.
they have like all those countries are
Like Denmark and the free education.
they're free university,
Yeah.
and they're among the best places to live if you're women.
Yeah.
For all, your maternity leave and all these things, and very progressive.
And what are your basic needs are education, healthcare, a roof over your head. So if
And
your
emergency
education
service.
and you have
Yeah.
children, and you have healthcare covered, so even if you're taxed a lot.
Yeah. And she said
You
basically
can
it was
focus
safe.
on one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was safe. She said that's what's, basically is that these, the parks are safe. Yeah.
Speaking of safety, on the CBC just coming over here, I don't know if you guys heard about the whole Air Canada taking their
Oh, yes.
their flight attendants or the crew not staying downtown, but I guess their statement said something about the safety, and because some of the hotels had people that were displaced by the floods that were staying in the hotels, and that was causing problems in downtown. But the people they were in CBC, they were talking about it. The people that were displaced were a lot of Aboriginal communities.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of flack now on Air Canada because
Oh,
they're saying
big
it's so
time.
dangerous, and it's the same thing, the perception.
But the interesting thing is 3 blocks away from this hotel is the Air Canada, major Air Canada building.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I go
I
to
saw
Winnipeg
that.
all the time,
Yeah.
and I stay downtown. I mean, it's not a big deal, but Air Canada specifically mentioned the folks that were staying downtown,
Yeah.
displaced by the floods, but these people are Aboriginals that were displaced from First
Mm.
Nation communities.
And
So should they?
Connect the dots. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know, it did, yeah. They're suddenly now backtracking, but,
Yeah, and I've stayed in the hotel too.
Yeah.
The hotel, there's nothing wrong with the hotel, so it's basically obviously the people that are around in the hotel or around in the downtown core that they're
yeah.
concerned about.
And didn't they interview someone who owns or worked with the Goldeye hockey
baseball team.
team?
Oh, you were listening to the same thing I
And he
was, yeah.
said, we've been
Yeah.
there 1,000 times, we've never had
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah.
I've stayed in that hotel.
And same with the mayor, and the mayor also
Yeah.
the mayor is asking for an apology,
Oh,
Yeah.
they should.
and they should, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I mean, you go downtown Winnipeg, and I go there, that's where I stay, and I've walked around downtown, and yes, you see that there's a lot of First Nations people and Aboriginals, but it shouldn't, I mean, Winnipeg, I mean, the facts are there. Winnipeg's a city, it's a city that has a lot of crime rates, but
Mhm.
there's a high crime rate there, but,
They're also the #1 place in Canada for Slurpee consumption.
For
oh,
what?
wow.
Yep. Just fun fact for you.
For what?
Slurpee consumption.
Really? Oh.
Well, Winnipeg has great food.
Yeah.
Slurpees don't count as great.
I was adding to that.
That's right.
That is, they consume a lot of Slurpees, but they have great food. It was sort of a qualification that they actually.
Also, they
Great
also have great
restaurants,
food.
yes. Great restaurants.
I know, I'm just teasing.
But, yeah, but I find that it's just a continuation of
Mhm.
the.
I'm just hearing this
Oh,
for the
yeah.
first time, and honestly, it's such a great example of the racism in Canada.
That's what it
It's
is.
basically-
And people
we are
say, oh, we're
in
not
so
racist.
denial.
Yeah.
You know, Samantha was talking a little bit about racism just before you guys all got here, because I was telling her some of my experiences. Just as my brother, he looks 100% Native. He has most of my mom's genes, well, appearance, I should say. And then I don't look as Native as they both do, and there is a huge difference in the way we're treated. People have no problem telling me an Indian joke and thinking that it's funny, ha ha ha. And then when I say, oh, did you know I'm status? It's suddenly a different tune. And then they see my brother and they treat him differently. My brother has been randomly beat up in Sylvan Lake. It also happened to the one guy that happened to have Indian descent, from like East Indian descent. So, you know, he got randomly beat. From out-of-towners, granted, but still,
Yeah.
there's no difference between them.
Well, there was just that recent case of the white supremacy. Was it in Edmonton? It was all over the news, but I forget now if it was Edmonton or not. But
Really?
these two guys got, you know, they were just even propagating hate mail or posters about this white supremacist group, and we have those in Calgary. There's
In
these,
Calgary,
you know, just
it's
this
actually-
this early summer or spring.
They
there
do
was
marches.
there was
Yes,
this
Calgary,
marches
actually,
too,
it's,
so-
the disgrace of Calgary is that we have the highest
Yeah.
rate of the white supremacists here. That's what's scary.
They have their march.
Yeah,
Oh, they
usually
once a
do-
year they have their march. These guys all cover their faces. They're all so proud to be the racists.
Really?
They all cover their
Where
faces.
was I?
Yeah.
in
So
front of
Jason
City-
Devine, I don't know if you remember him.
yeah,
He's the
yeah,
communist
I know
that ran.
Jason.
I'm good friends with him, and him and his wife actually run that whole anti-race rally.
Yeah.
And every year so funny. I spent last night with them because we were planning protest occupation Calgary, the continuation of what's happening in Wall Street down here in Calgary.
How are you?
Yeah, so we were talking about that, and they were saying that during one of their rallies that the police purposely separated them, and construction companies purposely separated their rally and such. So, you know, we were talking about basically the police tactics used against us protesters, and it was from that anti-race rally. Yeah, so, and they do it every year. And how I even got to know Jason, I don't know if you heard the story. Jason and his wife, they'll take a known KKK member or Nazi, whatever you want to call them, neo-Nazi, and they'll take their picture and they'll tell, oh, this person is a neo-Nazi, and like put flyers up around their neighborhood. So Jason one day went to answer the door, and 4 guys came in and beat the crap
That
out
was
of
on the
him
news,
while
and his children were in
his
yes.
children were
Yes.
in the house.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's actually how I learned about Jason. And then coincidentally, he ends up running here. Like, it was just a really crazy. So, and from that incident, I went down to the used bookstore and found Warren Kinslow's book on Web of Hate, and it talks about neo-Nazism and white supremacy here in Canada. So I was actually going to suggest that as the next book club book, if you guys are interested. You want to read that one next?
Yeah.
I think we've made our decision,
Which
haven't
one
we?
again, sorry?
The Web of Hate by
Oh, yeah,
Lauren. Yeah. So I think that'll be our next one, because actually we want to have that said tonight so that for Thursday's e-blast it can go out and give everybody a heads up. So
What I know also is that basically, and it brings out such, right, the fact that these guys all show, they're so proud that they're such bigots, that they cover their face.
Yeah, oh,
They
yeah.
cover their face, and it brings such rage that you're kind of like, oh, you coward, you cover your face, right? Well, the problem of it is, and this is what's happened at these rallies, is that people are so outraged, you know, basically is that then they go up and they start taunting, right? And the next thing they know, the person who's so anti, you know, kind of like, you covered your face, you coward, et cetera, et cetera. If you're gonna be a bigot, show your face, right?
Yeah.
They have hauled off and sucker punched the Nazi, and then they're charged.
yeah.
And that's the whole, and we had, CBC had its open house on Saturday morning, and the pro-lifers all showed up with their ugly
I was there.
Yeah. And they were,
I was
they
there.
lined themselves up right where the people were lined up to go inside. All it did was offend everybody in the lineup. And I had people come up to me and say, can you ask them to leave? No, we can't ask them to leave.
But I
And
thought everyone did a good job of just ignoring them.
that's what we had to do. We had to ignore them. And I had a couple of people say, well, you can't go up and tell them to fuck off, but I can. And I kept saying, no, you can't. Because
That's a
then
good
you're
one.
charged. Then you're charged. But, yeah.
I was coming back from the farmer's market on Heritage. It was yesterday.
Yeah.
The one just on Heritage.
Yeah.
McLeod. I was driving north on McLeod, and there was a street lined with them, and still people coming
Exactly.
carrying signs,
And they were making
children,
their
and
children hold the
Yes.
signs, which
I-
is sickening.
Yes.
made a point of sort of like checking them out with my
And then
not
they've got a
paying
truck,
attention
and
to
then they've got
that
a
one
truck
goes downtown all the time.
that drives around.
I see that one.
Yeah.
I just find that so.
The children.
Yeah.
The children made me. Normally,
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
ignore them, but the children that made
Yeah.
me really upset because they're
They have no
it's the
idea.
exact same of propagation of racism. You're teaching
Yes.
your child something,
Yes.
but only your idea, and you're not actually letting them learn what is the proper way
And
to
all
be.
I saw, apparently they were all ages, all
Yeah,
I saw
yeah.
holding the, right, because that's all I had vision of, was 15 to 18-year-old boys
Yeah.
holding up these signs. And it was kind of like, what the hell do you know about anything? Yeah.
I always find it
Probably
very.
organized by one of those mega churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
Yeah.
for those people,
Yeah.
that it must be a group of a church.
Yeah.
But I always feel like, they show the graphic signs,
Mm-hmm.
but that can go both ways. Like pro-choice people could show a graphic sign of a abused, beaten, raped teenager, but they don't. And it's like...
Or as a friend of mine said, that abortion's taking place, whether it's done safely or done with a coat hanger.
Yeah, like why,
Well,
it
and my
seems-
understanding, a lot of those pictures are actually miscarriages.
Yes.
And as a woman who is in that whole reproductive
Well,
phase,
that's the other.
when I found that out, I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't help but bawl, because how many, I think it's 1 in 4 pregnancies result in a
And
miscarriage.
that's what Morgenthaler always explained. He
Yeah.
had said, basically is that sometimes also it's, he said, you don't know, and he said, when you say that,
Mm-hmm.
right, is basically is that there's all the natural miscarriages, but, and he said, or sometimes also it's medically needed.
Yep.
Yeah. And
That's the
it's
other thing.
none of your business.
No, because it is exactly that. If me
Yeah.
and my doctor assess that
Yeah.
is what's necessary,
Exactly.
who are you to judge that
Exactly.
decision?
Yeah.
And the irony to all of that too is, like, I think of my boyfriend, who's now some pastor or whatever, and I think about the way he was when he was a teen, and the rumors that went around about all of the abortions he funded for his girlfriends, and I didn't even know that they were free.
But he was saved.
He was saved, right? So now he's good. Right.
That these 15 to 18-year-old boys, yeah.
Well, they don't know better. They probably go to church with their parents, and
Yeah.
they go
Yeah.
to church groups, and then they tell them what
Mm-hmm.
supposedly the Bible says, and then
And the other of it is don't have sex until you're married, just like Sarah Palin's daughters.
oh
Yeah.
right.
By the way, did you guys hear what happened in Ontario today? There was a pamphlet that was released, and it was authorized by the PC government, and they were basically put down the liberal education of sex education, and so talking, it was basically slurring homosexuals, gay community,
Yeah.
the whole gamut. It's absolutely disgusting. I took screenshots of the Globe and Mail because I don't trust the Globe and Mail. They'll probably pull the article. And I took screenshots of the pamphlet because I just can't see how this isn't. There has to be an uproar over this. I can't believe it. I was talking to the Rebuilding Liberals on Facebook, and all of them were all over this for sure. And a few lawyers were, talking, is this actual hate?
Mm-hmm.
So, authorized by the PCs.
It could be just ignorance, not just hate, which goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
It's true.
Mm-hmm.
Emotional based. And some people were saying that it's because kind of a last attempt at trying to sway some of the voters, a desperation
Mm-hmm.
tactic, but I don't know. I just thought it was awful.
Well, I was going to say, back to our last book, The Armageddon Factor, where it looked like Harper was letting the Christian right do his campaigning for him.
Yep.
But every time that they were relying on him to turn these rules around, he didn't
Chicken.
do it. Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's also is kind of like, well, I tried. And look at the backlash. Didn't work. I'll try again. And because that's what he's doing. He's dangling carrots.
Mm-hmm.
Stockwell Day would have done it. But Harper's dangling carrots, pretending he's one of them,
Yeah, but
where I don't think he is.
yeah. Well, now before he had the excuse that he was in a minority parliament.
Yeah.
Now he might, if he doesn't do anything
Yeah,
to that effect, he probably lose that base
yeah.
because he's gonna have 4 years of.
Well, and he's also got his buddy in Saskatchewan who's pushing on turning over the abortion law.
He's at Wall, Red Wall.
It could be some.
Like
some
not the
No,
premier.
no.
No,
This is a real backbencher in
Yeah,
Saskatchewan.
there's 2 of them now.
Yeah.
Two conservative backbenchers that are calling.
Yeah.
Well, basically they started protesting because the government finally decided to fund Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
So now they started coming out against abortion because they.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe they've come out with something else, but it's like these two guys are, basically out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to
Against
see if, because Harper has said, I'm not opening that can of worms.
Yeah.
But it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to kick those guys out, or what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Oh, I doubt it.
I'm sure he won't kick them out, but
No.
that's whether he likes it or not, that's his base. That's.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure he likes it.
Yeah, no kidding. So what are some, I guess, final points that maybe we should start getting to?
Well, there was.
I've bookmarked so much. But
Well,
what
he
do you-
has his. Talk about.
Tony Hall. I put, he went down to the University of Lethbridge at the invite of Professor Tony Hall to talk about the law of the Crown in Indian country. One of our book clubs, we actually had Tom Flanagan here, and we were talking about, I don't know, his campaign or whatever. And he's actually really against a lot of the Indian rights and such, and he has gone toe-to-toe with Tony Hall over that. And I only know because I know Tony Hall from some 9/11 Truth protests, and we've gotten to know each other quite well because of it. And so anyway, he's an advocate, and he's actually, it doesn't mention any of this in here, but he's defended the natives in justice suits and such. So I wish, I'd like to have met John Reilly and asked him what he thought of Tony Hall, and then what he thought of Tom Flanagan, because I thought that would be interesting to hear of his, because there's a lot of history there between the Tony Hall, Tom Flanagan, and the Native issue, and maybe he doesn't know about it, I don't know. Oh, and there was that Myron Thompson. Well, I was again asked to speak at the University of Lethbridge, and the forum was entitled The Changing Face of Aboriginal Politics in the 21st Century, and I shared my dais with Myron Thompson, who at the time was the MP for the constituency of Wild Rose, which included the reserve at Morley. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you remember if they said in here how many people vote in?
I don't remember seeing that, because
Municipal
that's a
election?
big issue for me, learning how many people vote.
I was just curious. I don't remember reading it, but if they had a percentage of 20% of people vote, or
Yeah.
what have you.
If it's open at all, who knows?
The terrifying thing of it is the last provincial election was like 37% of the population even voted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this PC vote, I bought myself a $5 membership and made my husband do the same thing, and we voted.
Mhm.
And there was still only 60,000 people or so.
65,000 people.
Yeah,
And that's
out
what I
of-
mean. And
there's
half of
what,
them-
3 million
and
Albertans.
I know an awful lot of, yes, well, considering that Stelmach, who was very unpopular, the Tories were very unpopular at that time, got over 100,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On CBC today, they were saying, where did those votes go? And I'm not sure that you hear a lot of the the pundits talking, and they all seem like they were positive that they were going to win, right?
Yeah.
And they were also positive that it was either going to be, that Nenshi wasn't going to get in at one point.
Mm-hmm. Rick Bell had the meanest things to say about Alison Redford on, I think it was Saturday's editorial. I just couldn't believe it. I thought, I hope she wins, and then sure enough, she won.
I was happy when I saw that she won.
Yeah.
And what was quite shocking is I went over to have dinner with people who were real staunch conservatives, real card-carrying stuff. Oh, you all voted, right? And they were all basically all for Allison, and I looked at them and I says, well, I said she's very credible, etc. And I said, you are aware she's a liberal.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying.
Yeah,
I keep
exactly.
telling them, she's a liberal in PC clothing. She did exactly what Ross Sherman wants to do,
Yeah.
clean it up from the inside. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, that's what I was telling you, and it was funny. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, I told somebody too that it's we're talking about the election, and she said she was surprised, and I said, she's like, but she was happy, and I said, well, you know, she's a liberal.
Yeah.
And she's like, you know, her face changed. Like, really? It's like, no, basically all the policies.
Exactly.
Just
There
liberal.
are
And she's like,
policies.
oh, well, now
Yeah.
I'm sad.
Yeah.
Interesting how if you have the right, you know,
Yeah.
outer package on the deal,
Yeah.
people are like, oh, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
I liked her. She was one of the only people who showed up
Mm-hmm.
from the PCs that were in the gay pride parade.
Yeah, I saw her there.
Yeah,
actually.
she was right behind us, so we were chit-chatty a lot. And
She is very credible.
she's a great
Oh,
lady.
Yeah, she's
Her,
very
you know, her background and
Yeah.
it's just amazing.
Yeah.
What she's accomplished.
Well,
It's going to
what I
be
was,
interesting to see how the old boys are going to handle it.
Everybody's talking about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is so much bullying in Alberta.
Oh well, that's
But you
the
know
other,
what? She's obviously managed it for this
Yes,
long. That's
yes.
why I voted for her.
Yeah.
Because I thought, you know, if you can be this successful in this disgusting atmosphere for this long, hats off to you, girl.
But,
But you were saying, where did these, you know, they only had so many votes?
Yeah.
And today on the radio, they were talking again, where did this vote go to?
Mm-hmm.
And they're already assuming that the vote has gone to the Wild Rose Party.
in Southern Alberta,
Yeah,
it has.
instead of liberals.
But
Southern Alberta and rural is basically anything north of Red Deer is a question mark. But rural Southern Alberta will be, and it's all over that Bill 50. And
Yeah.
Ted Morton, that was the first thing. Well, when I get in, I'm gonna immediately turn that over. And it was kind of like, you're too late, buddy.
Do you mean 36, the land in...
The land. That's
yeah,
what
it's
it is.
Bill 36.
Yeah.
Yep.
The
Because
land-
that
the
one
land-
is a...
the transmission
All
lines.
of the ranchers are upset about, all the farmers, everyone who owns land should be upset
Yes.
about that.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, I want to say his name is Keith Wilson, or I think he's a lawyer that went around educating
Yes. Yes.
people about that, and I
Yeah.
thought, hats off to you, buddy. You have
Because
alone
they
changed
took,
that.
because they knew, basically the PCs have always known their strength
Yeah.
has always been rural, and that they can do whatever they want to them.
Yeah.
And that's what they did, hoping that, you know, we'd stayed still back. They're not back.
No, that lawyer, he totally taught them all. I remember we were in High River listening to his speech, and all of the ranchers were around, like literally, but half of the crowd was wearing cowboy hats and belt buckles, and one old guy stands up and he's like, I thought in World War II we defeated those Nazis,
Yeah.
but it turns out the PCs of Alberta are here. You know, really, and that's how the atmosphere was. Where the whole atmosphere felt like, oh, our PC government just slapped us in the
Oh, yeah.
face. So,
And that's the
and you
others.
know who stood up? Daniel Smith and 4 other Wild Rose Alliance. They
Oh,
were
yeah.
right there.
Oh, and they have signed Southern Alberta, but not
Yeah.
anything north of Red Deer. North of
but
Red Deer.
Calgary should be fairly,
Well, but this is the whole thing, is that they also say that the province is more, because 99% of the people live in the cities, but 98% of the seats are rural. Because we don't have population, we don't have representation by population.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I'm like, every person that I meet in Calgary says they're not conservative. I'm like, why do we all
Yeah, I
vote?
didn't know
And
that.
we've been saying
I
this for
know,
years.
I'm
Who
like-
voted for them? Because
Yeah.
West.
I know. We just have to convince people to come out and vote Liberal. When I see the numbers in just other ridings in like Ontario, where it's like 30,000 people voted for Liberal and
Yeah.
28,000 voted Conservative, how do you get 60,000 people to come out in a riding? That's my big question. How do we do that?
How do we get 60? Yeah, and that's the other, is that basically is that them's that.
Nobody
This is what I
votes.
think is going to be interesting, though, that rural, either they're not going to vote, or they're not telling anybody how they're voting, but the biggest slap in the face would be,
Wild Roses all over.
no, yes, is the southern, but not north. The biggest slap would be vote Liberal.
Oh, if
Just
Raj
as,
Sherman.
and Raj is doing well, but and the farmers do have the old, fuck you.
Yeah, they do.
And
Once
there's
you-
no
once you
bigger-
make 'em mad.
and there'd be no bigger slap than that.
No
Right?
kidding.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, you know, we got nothing else to lose. We trusted you. Yeah, and that's what we don't know is going to happen.
Yeah, especially because I mean you have the Wild Rose Liberals, but you have the
Yeah.
Alberta Party
Yeah.
too, which is not that well
Well,
organized.
it
but
hasn't
it's-
done, no, but also it's now she's saying that there's not an election till June.
Yeah, she.
And-
which is
and
what
this
it
And
is
they're
the
not
other-
sitting in the fall, there's no fall sitting.
No, and there's no false sitting too.
Yeah.
But this is the other, is that basically, as I always say, that the Alberta Party were Liberals in a snit.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's very possible is that some will go to her and some will come back. But you can't have three kind of
Liberal party.
liberal-minded parties.
I'm sure it would be great to have like some diversity.
Yes.
Have some
An
Liberals,
opposition.
some Liberals.
Some opposition.
Yeah, and the
Well,
PCs.
yeah.
Oh my God, that would be such a dream. I might actually cry.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to see some of those old boys out there. It makes me wonder what, if a new party came in, or even with our current leader,
Mm-hmm.
if they did some housekeeping, what would they find?
Yeah,
If they
right.
really wanted to dig.
I know.
Well, Kevin Taft's book really laid out some
Yeah.
housekeeping
Yeah.
they could do. I wanted to this. I think this is a really great quote to kind of finish the whole
Mhm.
idea of the book, and it was actually Sitting Bull who says this: "The life of the white man is slavery. There are prisoners in towns or farms. The life my people want is a life of freedom. I have seen nothing a white man has, houses or railways or clothing or food, that is as good as the right to move in an open country and live in our own fashion." And I just thought that was so fitting because of the protests going on. I'm going to quote that and put it on my Facebook.
And there again is that dying of the killing of the soul.
Yep.
You
Yes.
put people into these prisons, basically, even
Res-
though it's a piece of land.
Yep.
Uh,
But the right to move.
Stop the what are the sundances,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and you've destroyed a culture.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Outlaw all of their spiritual ceremonies.
Yeah.
Yep. Ay, ay, ay.
From people who basically most came to North America because of religious persecution too.
Isn't that the irony?
Yeah.
Yep. I just found that quote that you were talking about. The Stoney are the Sioux-speaking nation. The Tsuut'ina are a Dene-speaking nation. While the Stoney and Tsuut'ina traded with each other, they are both enemies of the Blackfoot Confederation.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And then they lumped them all together
Yeah.
in the treaty.
That's right.
Well, even when we talk about Aboriginals,
Isn't the
but
Blackfoot Reserve is in the east though, right?
Mm-hmm. I think it's the south part.
Southeast part. So
Yeah.
it's not like the three reserves that are out west.
Yeah.
The Blackfoot's not involved in that.
No.
Yeah.
But when they did
They're
the
so
treaty
close.
signing,
Yes.
they lumped all the groups together. Which the other thing I thought was kind of interesting was when they were talking about the difference between, the small family groups based on being more nomadic and hunting the deer versus the large groups because they needed the manpower to actually hunt the bigger game. And then, you're ending up with communities that have completely different lifestyles, yet you're lumping them together and saying, here, this must be what you all want. You all want the
Yeah.
same thing, which was kind of.
But that's what we do that all the time. Even us, we talk about Aboriginal people, but there's the treaty, the First Nations, the Treaty Nations. There's the Métis, there's the Inuit. There's and these are not. These are very distinct groups, and even the First Nations within the First Nations, they're very distinct groups, like as you're saying, Sam. And then the Métis, they have a different situation. The Inuit, they have different situations. So. It's quite diverse, but we tend to talk about it as one group.
Well, yeah, and we use like the West Coast of BC totem pole as the symbol of
Yeah.
all of Canada.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like,
Well, exactly.
well, that's like you
Yeah.
said. That's one diverse small
Well,
group
yeah,
of
exactly.
of Native culture right there compared to
Mhm.
everywhere. We're all different.
Well, and the other minority groups, like African Canadians or African Americans, they actually divide up people more, like Caribbean, like in Nova Scotia, there's lots of black people from Caribbean descent, or people that have come originally from Africa through the U.S.,
Yeah.
but are many generation African American. Or then there's people that are now immigrating from Africa as refugees, but it's very distinct. People don't just lump.
No.
They talk about those groups, so why do we lump,
Yeah.
all
Well, it's like here.
religions together?
We have to talk about the South Sudanese community, but there's also there's different the Caribbean community there. So it's quite distinct, and it's a big mistake to lump everybody together.
And then
More interesting, and this goes back to you have to kind of. I had two Chinese friends. One was born in Canada Chinese, and the other one was off the boat from Hong Kong. And I thought, well, they're Chinese, they'll have something in common. I didn't know, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No kidding. Well, we talked about that during the election,
But
that
that's-
you have the Sundanese that are, well, any minority group, you have some that are Christian, some that are not.
Yes.
And
Oh,
the
that too.
Tories absolutely targeted the
Yes.
Christian minorities. So, something we
But
have
it's
to...
kind of like actually to one of his recommendations, number 5, is put an end to the ignorance about Aboriginal people. You have to put an end to
Yes.
ignorance. I mean, if you don't know anything about a group and you just hear about
Yes.
the stereotypes, you're never gonna change or change your mindset.
I had a
towards it.
mother-in-law who'd never met a Jew in her life, so she wasn't going to go out and meet anybody native.
Right.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I kept looking at her and saying, she says, I've never met a Jew, I've never talked to a Jew. And I said, well, you may, don't know about it. Oh, no, I know.
Jeez.
And then what was even more interesting
Wow.
is that they did a family history thing, and her maiden name was Quast.
Jewish.
And anyhow, and every other Quast that lives in Canada is Jewish.
Uh-huh. I knew that was coming.
Yeah.
I just knew it.
Yeah.
Oh, that poor lady.
And they fled, and she said they all spoke German, but she's, as a kid, she was told they fled Russia due to religious persecution.
Came
and
here
on
and
the, and on the
persecuted
boat, they could have become Seventh-day Adventists. Yeah, let's not be Jewish anymore, let's be Seventh-day Adventists, because they both have their Sabbaths on Saturdays. Yeah.
Ridiculous. Well, I really loved his recommendations at the end of here. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I really would
Yeah.
like to talk more to him and see what else he has to
Well,
say.
he has a. I don't know. He didn't tell me. I ran into him at a Rotary Club meeting. I asked him if he was going to be coming. Anyways, he said he was out of town, but he was saying he has another book that he's writing.
Oh, does he?
I didn't get. He was on the road, so I didn't get to ask him if it's still about the continuation or a similar topic. But he gave me the impression that it was, because I asked him, I hope you have a better epilogue next time.
Yeah, no kidding.
Um,
He actually mentioned in here that he was writing another book,
Mhm.
and he didn't actually say in the book what it was about.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that was the book he was talking to Gabriel about.
I can find
Oh,
out.
I didn't notice.
I
didn't remember
when
the
he
reference
thanks,
here, but
when he talks about his sister and how fond, like, he's a relative of mine, and you know, we're outlaws, but I definitely know, we spent an awful lot of Thursday, you know, he knows my family, I know his family, and so I know the house that he was talking about. I knew that Nellie McClung's house was actually Grandma Reilly's house. And so, you know, what I liked was that he, you know, the kind words he says about his sister, because that's my niece's grandmother. Yeah, so I can talk to my brother-in-law, my ex-brother-in-law, who's still my brother-in-law, and ask, what's the new book about?
yeah.
Yeah.
Please do.
Mhm.
Well, I'll probably have to read
Yeah.
that one too.
I liked this part on page 252, near the bottom under the human development. It says, in white society, our emphasis is on the development of the individual. And then at the bottom, they talk about the Aboriginal emphasis is on the relationship.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're taking the people in government designing policies to help better yourself and make a change, but it's emphasizing the wrong thing
Mhm.
at the base of the pyramid to work up the
Mhm.
ladder. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, how long are we going to try the same thing over and over until
Yeah.
we realize
Figure
it's
it
not
out.
working and do something else?
Well, that's right on. Well, any other closing ideas before we wrap up here? No? Are you glad you read the book?
I
Yes.
am. I went to the library and read it in the reference room because I didn't want to buy it.
Yeah, I understand.
I didn't want to buy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to eliminate my objects in my house. So
Yes.
I
It's
know,
true.
I know. I have so much stuff for sure. Are you glad you read the book?
I am, yeah. I thought it was very, very enlightening.
Yeah.
for me.
Mhm.